Is now a good time for me to bring up some random stuff?
Now's a great time for you to bring up some random stuff. And I'm really excited for folks that don't know, she's the national policy seat, and she's probably got good info around what's going on.
Well, this is actually more, this is announced at the last meeting, but since a lot of people weren't here, I went through our online website, the Medical Cannabis Task Force, and I made a chart of all of the minutes and the agendas from all the committees, and we're missing a lot of information, a lot of minutes and stuff that are up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email all of the chairs the chart that I have put together so that you guys can help me fill in some of the blanks as to what's missing so that we can get that up for Carol. So that's just a project that I told Carol I'd help with because her hours are reduced and I want to make sure we get as much information up online as possible. And as far as national policy updates, I'm really excited I got to go to Washington, D.C. last week. I had a sponsor send me out there. So I had a really fantastic time. I got to sit in on Joe Elford's moot court, which was a practice court at a university, and they reamed him. They were really mean to him, but it was really good practice because by the time he got into the court the following day, he really had his arguments sharp and ready to go. He only had 15 minutes, and the DEA had 15 minutes as well, and then he had 10 minutes for rebuttal. So it was a very short court date. I almost didn't make it in. There were only 200 seats, and I was 201, so I had to wait for someone to be kicked out. But I did get to sit in on a very historical proceeding. It's first time in 20 years we've had oral arguments in federal court on medical cannabis issues. The last time it was brought up, it was dismissed on standing, and the reason for that is because an attorney had filed the lawsuit, and they said if they changed the policy, it wouldn't affect the attorney directly. So this time, there's a number of patients that are having standing, including a veteran who is in Virginia, who has been threatened to be kicked out of the VA for using cannabis, so he has to seek his treatment elsewhere, and he doesn't have access to cannabis in Virginia. So, you know, the judges really did feel like the defendants did have standing. The good news is less than 3 hours of getting out of the court hearing, they had put in an order asking for more information. So rather than making a quick decision, they really want to have a thorough briefing before they make their determination. I'm unfortunately not sure how long it takes for them to respond, but that brief was filed on Monday, so that just happened this week. And no matter what the decision is, it's probably either not going to please us or not going to please the DEA. So what that means is that we're going to appeal that and hopefully be accepted into the United States Supreme Court on this issue. So that'll be really, really huge.
Information, there are folks that are a little bit concerned about having the category removed and actually trying to move forward with taking it off the CSA.
Can I give you a little bit of information on that?
Sure.
So ACE is asking for it to be scheduled in 2, 3, or 4, and the reason for that is because we want to be able to have research. Without having research, we can't prove to them how how helpful of a drug this is. We have just appointed on ACE's board the president of the American Herbal Association, and this is the organization that regulates herbs that the FDA doesn't really necessarily regulate. So these are like teas and things of that nature. So this organization is fighting for it to be off schedule altogether. So we're fighting for it to be in a different medical class, and the organization fighting for the herbs is asking it to be off schedule altogether. So these are fighting from 2 different angles, and we're hoping that they'll really have the ear of this organization because this organization's sole purpose is to regulate herbs. So it's been an amazing alliance that they made. It's just the beginning of this process, and it is making me very hopeful that we could potentially have it off schedule as well. But this is just a baby step.
I'm just wondering if the recent discovery, or actually not so recent discovery, since California Pacific Medical Center has known about it for 2 years, in the SF Chronicle, September 15th, section D1 under health, big bold letters right after I got out of court for Garden, it said an ingredient in marijuana is now known to fight some aggressive forms of cancer. It's a 3-page spread. I have the whole newspaper at home. It obviously kills cancer. California Pacific Medical Center has been doing it for 2 years, but they were worried to come public because of the stigma attached to it. Now, one other point. How can this herb even be classified as a drug when we have CB1 and CB2 receptors in our bodies? Drugs classically block the receptors, making our body not produce the neurons that we have, so when we stop taking the drugs, we withdraw. Cannabis doesn't do that. it should have never even been put in that schedule.
There's more cannabinoid receptors in your body than receptors for almost any other chemical in your body. So our bodies are definitely made to have cannabinoid intake. As far as studies, there are thousands of studies that have been done in other countries, but very few are accepted here. And the reason for that is because the only way you can get permission is from the NIDA program, which is specifically for drug abuse. So if you're looking for any positive results, they're not going to approve you for those studies. And with only one source of cannabis in the United States at a pretty low quality, the results of those studies are probably going to be a little bit biased too. So we're really depending on international studies to give us information that's accurate. There was one other point that I wanted to make, and I'm spacing on it now. So what was the two things that you mentioned? One, that the studies are happening. Oh, I know the point that I wanted to make.
About California Pacific Medical. Right now, as we speak, they're treating cancer patients.
The DEA in court last week admitted that there were 15 different studies that they had given cannabis for. And when they were asked for the results in court by the judge, they said they didn't have them, that they were only in charge of distribution, and that was it. So the whole court got a good laugh out of that. You know, the fact that the DA is not going to even make a follow-up call on the people they're distributing cannabis to seems really silly. But I think that the facts might be that those results are positive, and she might not just want to bring them into court for that reason. So according to the DEA, there's only 15 studies here in the United States, and that was as of last week.
I just want to put a point of information out there. On the PAN website, there is a position paper on the dangers of some of the rescheduling for just in lieu of patients, distributors, and cultivators. And Patient Advocacy Network also, along with some of the botanical and herbal companies, believes that it should actually be taken off the CSA, which, I mean, there's ups and downs to just about everything that we do, right?
I just want to make one more point, and then Vince has a question over here. When it was put in the placement of a Schedule 1, it was only supposed to be there as a temporary placement. It was the Secretary of Health and Human Services that was directed to do that with the intention of having more studies done to put it in a real placement. And even when the DEA judge said that it should be declassified, the DEA chose not to do that in 1988. So, you know, we were under the understanding that that was going to be a different placement, but that hasn't happened to date. And DEA does have that authority.
Sarah, as far as looking for international studies, I'd like to make a recommendation. Look real hard at Israel.
Absolutely.
Real hard, because they have, for about 15 years, been treating their service people, and they are the ones that actually broke the egg of the world event.
Raphael Meshulam is the one who discovered THC, and he's the one who's in Israel. And there are two different organizations that keep databases of all the international studies. One is the IOM, International Organization of Marijuana, possibly. And there's two different organizations that specifically database all of that material.
And the last one.
This is not national, it's state. Yesterday we got an announcement of the Javon Jackson decision out of Southern California. And this was someone being prosecuted by Bonnie Jimonis, who is someone who is one of the district attorneys that is one of the worst in the state. And she had cracked down and raided numerous dispensaries and prosecuted, I believe this was a veteran himself that was running a facility. And they appealed the decision, and ASA won. And what that means is it's now legitimate under California law for sales of cannabis to happen, and the patient does not have to be directly involved in the cultivation. You know, specific members can do that duty, and all of the members are not required to do that. And in the Butte County decision, we had very similar language come out, but this is an appeals court decision that will affect the entire state. So this legitimizes all of our dispensaries. So that's really good news. Just
to boil that down a little more, really what the focus on that case was is Mr. Jackson went to trial, and district attorney said, whoa, there's no medical defense here because you're not really a collective in the sense that everybody's participating, sharing the work, and doing all this other stuff. They went to trial, and throughout the entire medical defense, he then proceeded on just a distribution case, distribution of marijuana, and got convicted. Then they appealed the issue, and the whole issue they were appealing is whether or not the medical defense should have been presented. And so what happened is they had to then go through the reason why it was excluded. Well, the argument for exclusion was, well, this isn't truly a collective, not everybody's doing anything, not everybody's involved. And the appellate court said, no, this is BS. just because you have a collective doesn't mean that you can't have individuals doing specialized services, and you can't have, you know, individuals basically participating that really where their only participation is cash. You know, if you look at the classic, you know, food co-op dynamic, a lot of people become a member of the food co-op, but I can go in and still shop at the food co-op without ever becoming a member. The real distinction they focused on here is that it is mandatory membership in this kind of collective dynamic, but that the members don't all have to do, you know, overlapping types of work. That in fact, somebody can be a member and just pay cash and receive product. Which, if you have listened to kind of the history of what's happened in California, that's been one of the hang-ups systematically that you've heard all across the state is the exchange of cash for marijuana. Well, you're kind of getting outside of the collective dynamic there. That's just straight sales. And that's literally what you've heard really from the southern part of the state, much more so than the northern part of the state. And if I remember, this came out of San Diego. I think the Jackson matter's out of San Diego. So Mr. Jackson got ordered a new trial where he gets the opportunity to present his defense now. We'll see if they even bother with the trial, and they might just dump the case. But that's literally what happened in that case.
Is there any chance they'll appeal this?
They can, but you know, it's one of those dynamics that I'd be surprised if they did, because I think that they don't really want to give the Supreme Court of California an opportunity to endorse it, because right now it's just an appellate court level. You know, you appeal it to the California Supreme Court. Well, the district attorney might end up, you know, basically effectively creating bad case law that she has no interest in creating.
And has the California Supreme Court given how much
Kamala Harris had written an opinion on this case against it, and they ruled against her favor, so that was really good. I mean, it wasn't
I
good
think
news
it's
that she had
important
made
for
those
folks to know
opinions.
that she wrote against it.
the likelihood the California Supreme Court would decide
Correct.
against it, which will influence whether or not they try to appeal this, right? I mean, it's going to be a slant vote against it, and it will.
Right now, the California Supreme Court is not showing a lot of interest in jumping into this debate. Not to say that they won't, and not to say that at some point it'll happen, but they're not particularly keen right now to jump into the middle of this.
So, which might let this go fly?
I have a good feeling that that may be the case.
I'm not sure. The one last thing I want to mention on this case is they do require the dispensary to be a not-for-profit. Not a 501c3, but they do want a not-for-profit status.
So not-for-profit versus doesn't have to be non-profit, but it has to be
I
not-for-profit.
didn't use the language directly, but it's my understanding that is that incorrect?
Well, no, you do not have to be a 501c3.
Right.
501c3 is actually it's very difficult to become. A lot of requirements, a lot of hoops to jump through. And in fact, I'd probably tell you it's a horrible idea to do it if you're doing it as a dispensary. But really, they did focus on that it has to be a not-for-profit. There's a host of non-profit ways.
Formalized non-profit corporation.
Well, you can be a non-profit mutual benefit. You can be a host of things in this state that's
You can also be
not a 501c3.
Magic Johnson's health clinics are not-for-profit health clinics, so.
No, they just say not-for-profit.
Kaiser.
Exactly.
Kaiser's not for profit.
$22 billion
Isn't that
not-for-profit.
interesting? That's why I like people don't scream when those words
Most
come in.
hospitals are nonprofit.
I wondered if you guys, my time's a little bit limited, just I got to deal with a couple other things. And before Sarah came, we were talking about the impact report. And Dr. John had a very good idea about patient input. Do we want to take literally 5 minutes and just see if there's anybody else since we have a host of patients here in the room that we would want to add to that questionnaire?
Like read through the questions and see if there's another question that we want to do?
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything literally that anybody thinks we're missing, Stuart, if you want to.
So you want me to read these?
Just read the questions, but loud so that everybody can hear.
Yeah, I think we're gearing this towards, the first question should be, are you a member of a dispensary that's been closed, right? People that are going to be impacted. At that point, the next question is, has there been an increase or decrease in the amount of travel time in order to acquire your medicine? Have you experienced any loss of services, and if so, what kind of services? What has the overall impact on medical cannabis access been?